Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is another fun build video. There's going to be 8 new fun builds in here with weapons I've never really used or made builds for before. This is going to be a really interesting one, and we're going to start right here from the beginning with the Sacred Watchdog build using the Watchdog's Greatsword. Something to mention about the Watchdog's Greatsword is it actually gets a B in Faith Scaling and Flame Art and Sacred, which is pretty cool for a weapon as big as this one. Also, later in the video there's going to be something informative you might not know about. Definitely be sure to check that out at the end. You know me, I love sharing information. It's something I've known for a while, but I haven't really experimented with it much, so maybe it'll help you guys out. For equipment, we have the Watchdog's Greatsword in Sacred Affinity. We are using Sacred Blade with it, the Erdtree Seal. We hit 51 poise if you want to check out the armor set. Ritual Swords, Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Arsenal Charm, Holy Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. For stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance, 30 Strength, that gets us to 45 Strength when we're two-handing it, 15 Dexterity, 70 Faith with the Faith tier. And then we're going to be using Golden Vow, Howlish Shabiri, and then I also added the Black Blade Incantation. I'm actually going to show another fight with an NPC. You can throw that in too. It does fit well with the build, and it goes well with the Erdtree Seal. Because we're boosting holy damage, you can add in Black Blade. I never really used the Watchdog's Greatsword before. It's a pretty cool weapon. I like that it gets the B in Faith Scaling. Now, it does have a lot less base damage than the regular Greatsword, but the scaling is nice. And, of course, again, since we're boosting holy damage, you could throw in Black Blade. Or even the Black Knife as a backup weapon. Any holy damage works. Alright, the next build up here is going to be the Omen Cleaver Blade build with Wild Strikes. This is a weapon I never really made a build for, and I gotta say, it's pretty good with Blade. So, since this weapon has an innate 55 bleed on it, I believe it gets an A in Strength Scaling. We're running this as a Strength build. With Blade, you'll get around 95 bleed in total, making it a good option for something like Wild Strikes. Another thing is, of course, as always, all footage is on New Game Plus 7, the max scaling of the game, and all builds are at rune level 150 as well. I use the same character for this one, currently on Journey 34. And I actually now have close to 2,000 hours into Elden Ring, which is pretty crazy, but it is my favorite game of all time and the main game I play. Although I have been doing a little bit of stuff for Helldivers 2 on my alternate channel, Your Average Variety Gamer, on the side. It's a really fun game, but that being said, Elden Ring is still the best game I've ever played. When I tell you I'm one of the most excited people for DLC, I do mean it. I cannot wait. It feels so long even though it's 2 months away. We have the heavy Great Omen Cleaver. We are using Wild Strikes and Bloodflame Blade. We have the Claw Mark Seal. You can check out the armor set, the White Mask. We have Rod Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Shield Talisman for some defense, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier so we could do our buffs. Let's jump into stats for this one. Now, a lot of people get confused. When it says 25 Faith, my base Faith is 15, so the levels will actually add up to 160 with the Faith tier, so keep that in mind. For this fun build, we have 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 31 Endurance, 66 Strength, hitting 99 when we're two-handing it, 15 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and of course Bloodflame Blade to get a total of 95 bleed. Alright, we finally have a build for Phantom Slash on here, though we're using the Vulgar Militia Shotel. It gets an A in Dexterity Scaling and Blood Affinity, which is pretty cool, and it's going to help us here. Yeah, it's one of just a couple weapons, maybe 2 or 3 in total, that get an A in Dexterity Scaling and Blood Affinity, so that's something interesting about this weapon. We have probably a little over 500 AR. The bleed build-up is pretty good, though, at around 129, almost 130. Also, comment below on weapons I have not covered. If you believe there's a weapon out there that's quite good that I haven't covered, just comment below and I'll either attach a link on one that I have covered if I have covered it before, and if I haven't, I'll probably cover it in a future video. Yeah, it'd be cool to kind of do more videos like this one. I may even do a video where I take like bad weapons again and try to make them good, or weapons you really don't use or find too often and turn it into something good. Something like that. Just to keep it interesting until we get to DLC. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment, stats, and everything you need to know. Also, if there's anything specific you're looking forward to in DLC, for me it's going to be the weapons and builds. Comment that below. I'm sure that'll be interesting too. For this, we have the Vulgar Militia Shotel with Phantom Slash. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal, that would be best. White Mask, we have 51 poise. And we have the Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Melissen's Prosthesis, Ritual Shield Talisman, Green Burst Crystal tier, Faith tier, Margit Shackle is the item I'm using to stun the boss, by the way. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance, 16 Strength because we're the hero class, 45 Dexterity with Militia's Prosthesis, 45 Arcane to increase our bleed, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this build, and overall I will say Phantom Slash is really fun to use. It's definitely a fun one. And the next one up here is a requested one that somebody's been commenting on my channel, so here's your build for this one, and that is going to be a Bloodhound Dagger build. I used the Parrying Dagger because I never really used this weapon before, so I figured I'd do a build for it. It's in Blood Affinity, and the offhand we have the Miséricorde and Cold Affinity. The whole concept here is to use Bloodhound Step to kind of sidestep and dodge and whatnot, and then get up close and use the daggers as quickly as possible to build successive hits, and also to build up Frost and get some bleed procs too. I also added the Reduvia as a backup weapon to give you a mid-range option. I figured that would give this build a little bit more versatility because daggers are relatively short range. I'm not a big fan of fist weapons and daggers because of the short reach they have, but with a backup weapon like the Reduvia, you really can't go wrong. And we're able to get in some good damage on Godric here, but once again, we're using daggers, so it's not going to be, you know, super overpowered levels of damage, but you will be able to dodge because we're using Bloodhound Step. You'll have 2 daggers, you'll get Frost and Bleed, and of course, again, with the backup Reduvia, you have something for the mid-range too. And I had fun with these builds. All of these builds I really had a good time with. Really only the last one on here was kind of an experimental build, the 8th one that's on here. But overall, I had a really good time with all these. It was fun doing something like this using weapons I don't normally use. If you guys want to see another build video like this is definitely something I'd be willing to do. And hopefully when DLC arrives or when we get close to DLC, we'll get some of the Elden Ring hype back and we can get back into the game and hopefully come up with some builds. I'm sure all the builds that we're used to using probably aren't going to be fantastic for DLC, but with 8 new weapon types, there's going to be a lot of variety. Another cool build with the daggers. This is definitely one I like and I would try again. I also may do on my alternate channel something for daggers eventually because I don't really give daggers a lot of love, so it'd be cool to do like a highlight video or something. If I do that, it'll probably be on my alternate channel, Your Average Variety Gamer. Alright, in a second here, we're going to go over stats, equipment, everything you need to know. We have the Parrying Dagger and Blood Affinity with Bloodhound Step. We have Reduvia as a backup weapon. You have the Cold Miséricorde. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal, hit 51 poise. We have the White Mask. And we have the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Militia's Prosthesis. We have the Ritual Shield Talisman for some defense. We have the Green Burst Crystal tier for some stamina, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this build. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance. This is actually the same setup as the Phantom Slash build, so you could use these 2 builds together with 45 Dexterity and 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And we're using Golden Vow for 15% more attack and defense, and Flame Grant Me Strength for 20% more for our physical attack. And next up here we have the Gargoyle Pyro build. This uses the Gargoyle's Greatsword, something that I haven't really used very often. It does get a B in Flame Art and Sacred, which is pretty cool. Another good weapon for Faith builds. And this one actually has 2 parts and 2 bosses to it because I ended up adding incantations to the build to kind of mix it up and give it variety so that you're doing more than Flaming Strike. As you guys know, Flaming Strike is one of my favorite Ashes of War, and in this case you'll get around 850 AR once your sword is on fire. Which, for the weight of the Gargoyle's Greatsword, is excellent. This is once again a little bit of a Strength Faith build. By the way, the first part of Flaming Strike scales with your Strength stat. The second part is AR, so the second part will be Faith based in this case if we're using Flame Art. Let's jump into equipment, stats, and everything you need to know for this build. And for equipment, we have the Gargoyle's Flame Art Greatsword, Flame Art Affinity, Flaming Strike. We are using the Erdtree Seal because it has good Fate scaling. We hit 51 poise. Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Shield Talisman, Flame tier, I call it the Fire tier, Fate tier. Let's jump into stats. Now for stats on this one, we have 70 Faith. We're the same stats basically I think as the first build. 30 Strength, 45 Strength when we're two-handing this. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance. And for this one, we are buffing with Golden Vow, which I already explained in another clip. And Hellish Brewery will give you 25% generic damage for everything for around 40 seconds. Let's go into the second part. So for the second part, we're going to be using the Giant Seal in combination with our base build for Flaming Strike. We didn't really change much here, but we are going to be using Flame Fall upon them, which is really good for some of the bigger targets in the game. Also an incantation I rarely ever used. I do believe Giant's Flame Take Thee is generally speaking an upgrade, but this one costs less FP, and if you're hitting a big target and all the fire ends up hitting, it does do massive damage. Also, if you followed the video to this point, definitely hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss out. I cover Elden Ring like crazy, and when DLC comes around, I'll be covering Elden Ring then too, making some crazy builds and sharing everything that I find. Let's talk about the incantations we're using. And we are using Giant's Flame Take Thee. We're using Catch Flame and then Flame Fall upon them. They're all pretty good. 2 of them are boosted by the Giant Seal, and then of course we were using once again Golden Vow, Hellish Brewery to buff the damage on this one. Another fun build, and we are going to go into the next one now, which is the All Frost Rapiers build, which for Rogier's Rapier I never really used them by themselves, so I decided to use 2 of them in this case and go for an All Frost build. So the deal here is one is in cold affinity with the glint blades, but we're not investing in our intelligence stat. We're not worried about the damage from the glint blades. We're just using them for poise damage, and then the offhand one is in cold affinity with chilling mist. And now, the Magma Worm does have decent resistances. Overall, his resistances against frost and everything, they're pretty substantial. We did get a posture break in there. We're going to take advantage of that. We're also using the Dagger Talisman to increase our critical damage, and Rapiers have a 110 critical multiplier. Yeah, so each glint blade will do around 10 poise damage for a total of 40 if they all hit. You can add this to any build, but in this case it really fits this one because we have Rogier's Rapier, and of course turning it into an all frost build ended up being a really fun build. Speaking of that, Rogier's Rapier will actually get a B in dexterity scaling and cold affinity, so you don't have to worry about too much intelligence investment anyway. You get a decent amount as far as cold build up. I think it's like 125 for the frost build up, and the B in dexterity scaling is going to help you. A lot of weapons in cold affinity, you don't have to put too many points into intelligence. It's just the way it is as far as they scale. Most of the time they don't scale that well in cold affinity for intelligence, so whatever your main stat is, especially in this case if you're getting a B, you're going to go with that instead. Alright, we took the Magma Worm down, got a Frost proc or 2, got a Poise break in there. Overall, I think he has about 150 posture on New Game Plus 7 too, so pretty impressive there. This is a good build if you want to do some Poise breaks and if you want to get in some Frost damage and Frost procs. So let's jump into equipment, stats, and everything you need to know. Yeah, Chilling Mist is really convenient too. You could add that to a lot of builds to get for good frost build up. Here we have 2 Rogier's Rapiers, one in cold affinity, the other one with Chilling Mist. The first one has the glint blades on it. Any seal for buffs, we hit 51 poise. Yeah, they're both in cold affinity. One has Chilling Mist for added frost. Dagger Talisman, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Militia's Prosthesis. You could replace either one of those with the Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Thorny Tear, Faith Tear. Let's jump into stats. I use these because I really haven't used them before too much, other than for the glint blades, just to activate the glint blades with Rogier's Rapier. But you could replace the offhand one if you don't have 2 with a regular Rapier. That would be fine. We have 75 Dexterity, 60 Vigor, Golden Vow, Flame Grimmy Strength. And for our next build, we have the Gargoyle's Great Axe, another one that I really haven't covered on my channel or talked about much. This gets an A in Strength Scaling and Cold Affinity, so that's kind of cool. And we have yet another Frost build. And of course we're using a Roar too. If you don't know about the Roars, by the way, they have a status effect multiplier. The big weapons, the biggest weapons in the game, the Colossals and whatnot, are 3 times. Every other weapon, I believe, is around 2 times the status effect. Oh, and I figured I'd mention this in a video. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, my whole channel ahead of DLC is completely reorganized. It looks totally different than it looked before, so if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely be sure to check out my channel as it's all organized now. Yeah, there's sections for like the early game guides, there's sections for my top and most popular videos, there's sections for my personal favorite videos on my channel, there's sections for fun builds, by damage type, by stat, all that stuff. It's completely different now. That was why I repeated some of the builds, by the way, with the top 8 damage types and ended up optimizing. I kind of re-optimized them anyway. I made them better than they were, but I ended up using a lot of the same ones. It was all to kind of organize everything ahead of DLC so that it's all there and you don't have to look for some random list video to find the build. You can easily find it now on my channel. Yeah, like Faith, Strength, etc. It's all there, very easy to find. We have the Gargoyle's Great Axe. We're using Braggart's Roar. We have Cold Affinity, Highland Axe for the passive, Claw Mark Seal. We hit 51 poise. Roar Medallion, Ritual Swords Talisman, Axe Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman. You have the Spike Crack tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. And we mentioned that we get an A in Strength Scaling and Cold Affinity, so that's pretty cool. We have 66 Strength, 99 when we're 2-handing it, 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 31 Endurance. We have 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And then, of course, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this build. And keep in mind, by the way, the Shard of Alexander doesn't boost Roar, so use the Roar Medallion and Highland Axe passive. Alright, the last build on this list, and this one's for pure fun before we get into something interesting I wanted to show you guys at the end. And this is going to be a build based on Rykard's Raincore and then Magma Shot. And in our main hand, we have Lucette's Staff. That has around 314 scaling. We have 60 intelligence. We have some faith investment, but Lucette's Staff's still our best bet. In the offhand, we have the Gelmor Glintstone Staff to boost Magma Shot by 15%. And yeah, this isn't the most damaging build on this list. I would argue, actually, it's not really an argument probably. Most of the other builds on this list are probably going to be better than this one, but I hadn't used the Gelmor Glintstone Staff before for anything, not even a passive boost, and I've never used the Pickaxe, which I also threw Spinning Weapon on. Yeah, that's in Cold Affinity, I believe, for some Frost build-up. That's just a little bit of an added bonus, but overall we're going to be using Rykard's Raincore. That doesn't get boosted, I don't think, by any staffs, but Magma Shot will be boosted by 15% when we're using the Gelmor in the offhand. Still, these sorceries are really fun. By the way, with the same build and setup that I had here, I actually hadn't changed my stats from one of my other videos. I ended up respecting for a lot of these builds, but not for this one. You can run the Sword of Night and Flame build too in my video from Wednesday. Should be 2 videos before this one. Yeah, I'll leave that one in the description below. That goes over the Rivers of Blood, Moonveil, and Sword of Night and Flame, what they're like now. We have the Pickaxe and Cold Affinity Spinning Weapon, Lucette's Staff, Gelmor Glintstone Staff in the offhand for the boost. Golden Order Seal's giving us 318 scaling, 51 poise. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Graven Mask Talisman, Flame Tier, I usually call it the Fire Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And the stats on this one didn't really change from my Sword, Night, and Flame build. We have 60 Intelligence, 35 Faith with the Faith Tier, we have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 22 Endurance, 16 Strength. And we're going to be using Golden Vow, Hellish Brewery, Magma Shot. We have Rykard's Raincore, and then if you want to use the seal, you can throw in Catch Flame too, because we're boosting fire damage. It's a nice little pocket incantation. Alright, now that the builds are done with, I want to do a little bit of info here at the end. I don't know how many people know this. This is something I've known for a long time. I just really don't do much with it, but you can actually run double Ashes of War in some circumstances if you're near a site of grace. So we're going to take a look at Guts Greatsword, and right now we have around 700 and something, a little bit, maybe a little bit over 800 AR. I think it's a little bit over 800 AR, and we're going to put Craigblade on the Guts Greatsword. So now we're going to activate Craigblade. Craigblade's going to give you 15% more physical attack, so that'll give us over 900 AR in total, and it'll also give you 10% more poise damage too. We're going to switch to Giant Hunt, and you do have to stay in the same affinity for this to work. And now we're going to be grabbing Giant Hunt, and what's going to happen here is for about a minute, by the time you do this, it's probably going to be about 45 seconds, you're going to have over 900 AR, a little bit of additional poise damage, and then you're going to have the Ash of War Giant Hunt on the Guts Greatsword. Yeah, so the troll did kill me once when I was testing different things, but you can see here we have over 900 AR, I think around 930 or something. We have Giant Hunt, a lot of poise damage, and we're able to do a lot of physical attack because we're near Site of Grace. It's something that really only works when you're near a Site of Grace, and you can do crazy stuff too. You can throw Seppuku on Double Slash if you want as well, and that'll give you a physical damage buff and more bleed build-up, which is kind of interesting. And then, of course, Craigblade with several different Ashes of War is great for strength builds. I don't know how many people that's going to help. I just wanted to share it. When I was doing crafting stuff, I was messing around with different things, seeing if I could come up with something crazy. Thanks for watching this one. I hope everybody appreciated the fun builds and a little bit of info. Definitely be sure to sub if you want more Elden Ring content. I'll leave a couple videos in the description below. If you're new, I have an early game Bloodhound's Fang build out now that's pretty incredible. And then I'm going to leave that Rivers of Blood, Moonveil, and Sword of Night and Flame build in the description too. I hope everybody enjoyed this and getting back to the fun builds. If you want to see more fun, unique builds, stuff like that, be sure to comment below. And of course, thanks for watching. See you guys soon.